Hey friends, welcome back to another Timonspodcast. I'm your host Timon, and this is my podcast, Cool Conversations with Cool People. And man, do I have a cool conversation today for you guys. But first, let's get to some business. Check us out on Facebook, on Instagram, and on YouTube. I got clips coming up. I got things happening. Timon's Podcast or Timon's Podcast Clips. Twitter as well. Timon's Podcast. Also check out our today's sponsor, Quiet River Massage and Revival, located in Syracuse, Indiana. Jasmine has the thing for you. She is awesome at massages. She's got a very cool space, a really sweet location, a nice setup, and she can relieve any tension that's in your body. You may be stressed as can be from work, from summer, from everything that's been happening in your life. Go check out Jasmine. She is located at 808 South Huntington Street, I believe. Links are below in the show notes. Quiet River Massage and Revival, Quiet River Massage on Instagram. Go check her out. Book her right now. 30, 60, 90-minute massages, hot rocks, essential oils. She's got you covered. So with the business out of the way, let's talk about today's episode. And I had a great conversation with Hope Bechtel. She's been on the podcast before. Her episode about who she is and what she does is in the show notes below as well. But she came on and talked about what she spoke about at our church last Sunday or 2 Sundays ago. And it was about Jewish marriage ceremony and how that all works together. It was very insightful. There's a lot of key pieces that makes the whole Bible make a lot more sense, but I'll let her get into it. So thankful that she came on. Check out her information, Tamarisk Tree Ministries, and enjoy. Bye. Yo, welcome. We're live now. Hey. Hope, thank you so much for coming.
Hey, my
Thanks for
pleasure,
hanging out.
Yeah, it's a good time.
Thanks for chilling. Hey, Allison.
Hello.
Allison loves being on podcasts.
It's my favorite thing in the world.
Yeah. No sarcasm.
Yeah.
Hope,
Yeah.
you did such a great job of teaching at church last week. And so that's kind of why I wanted to bring you on. Also, I wanted to hang out with you this evening. And also, we had some tech stuff to talk about. Mm-hmm. And we had some good food to eat. And so, you preached at church, and it was really significant. It was really impactful, understanding some deep things. You've been on the podcast before. Mm-hmm. I don't know that episode off the top of my head, but I'll drop it in the show notes. So if you don't know who Hope is, go check her out on the last podcast. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm like, let's do a podcast. Let's talk. Yeah.
Yeah. That's crazy.
You were dropping knowledge too at dinner. Like,
yeah.
We've had a whole.
Allison's like, I didn't know I was signing up for a seminary course.
Yeah. We've had a whole podcast already before.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. It's all right.
That's so good, though. So,
cool.
Yeah, anyways, maybe real quick, just introduce yourself again for some people, but then real basic.
Just basic. Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Hey, everybody. My name is Hope, and I'm living in Goshen right now, and I've been here for a couple of years and love Jesus a whole bunch. And over the last 20 years, I've been introduced to like the Middle Eastern culture, the Jewish culture, and how that connects to my faith in Jesus, because that's the environment he was in when he was here. And so multiple trips to Israel, I think I've done 9 at this point.
Wow.
And all of them are focused on like genuine sites and places of events that happened in the scriptures. And one of the things that blew me away was when I learned about the marriage customs over there. And a lot of those marriage customs are still a thing today. Like that's how it works. In some of the more traditional families. And so when I grasped that and then saw, oh my goodness, that's what Jesus was doing here, and that's what he's doing here. And like people flippantly throw around, oh yeah, we're the bride of Christ. But we don't understand that that's actually the foundation of literally everything that's happening from day one. Literally day one with Adam and Eve to when people talk about Revelation, and they're always worried about all the end times things that are predicted there, which, I mean, that's significant, but it ends with us in a forever marriage with Jesus. So we should probably get a grasp on what this whole marriage thing's all about and how it works. So
one of the things I really
go ahead.
appreciate at church is when you explained it. It's like a framework, and we laid it on top, and it's like, oh, this makes things understand. Like it just made things like very understandable. I'm like, oh. Of course, this is why this happened, this happened, this happened. I don't want to give spoilers because you're going to explain things.
Feel free, spoil away. Right? It's all right.
First miracle, all those things. You're like, oh, why? There's a reason why these things happen in this order. One of the things, and you may get right into it, but I loved what you said at the start of this whole teaching is we are, like you said, getting married to Jesus. And it's like he's our groom. He's our groom.
Right.
The most powerful being in the universe
is your spiritual spouse.
Yeah. Like, and why would he in access to everything? Like he
has the storehouses of heaven at his fingertips, and all you have to do is
and you're connected with him. Like
you're connected to that.
Yeah. It like just setting that as the framework was like, whoa.
We can just sit with that for a minute and just sit with it. Like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. What does that mean?
Right.
Then you get into the dowry and all the other stuff, and you're like, oh, wow.
Whoa.
So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. Don't want to spoil too much. Let's get into it a little bit. You've got a deep knowledge on this, and, kind of talk me through some of this stuff here.
Okay. So, the marriage process has 4 different stages to it. Okay. And so I think before we get to that, though, one of the things we deal with here in our Western culture, Western European-based culture out of Greek and Roman cultures, is the fact that we tend to unknowingly kind of come at it from a Gnostic perspective where there's a difference between your physical reality and your spiritual reality. Like somehow they're completely separated from each other.
That's a really good point.
That's huge. And listen, in order to really grasp the really huge things I'm going to drop on you tonight, we have to address that. We have to kind of start with that as our baseline because that was introduced through philosophy. And we have philosophy is not in itself a bad thing, but it causes us to deeply misunderstand spirituality because we compartmentalize them into 2 different places. And so we approach our everyday life of going to work and buying the groceries and cleaning the house and taking care of the kids and all the things, right?
Yeah.
And then, if I have headspace for it or if I have time for it, then I acknowledge the spiritual reality of life. When in the Middle Eastern culture and in the ancient cultures, they were inseparable, that they were completely intertwined. And so if we start with that understanding, that's the baseline of all biblical culture the whole time, from the beginning all the way through when the Gospels and the church was being established and all of that. You need to understand your spiritual life is just as vibrantly alive and intricately intertwined with your physical life. And knowing that God did very pointed, specific things, like when he said, hey, I want you to have these 7 festivals to remember your relationship with me, the holidays with the Jewish people. There were specific foods that they were to eat at that time of year. Now, we do the same thing. We've got our Thanksgiving meals, and like, what are your favorite things? Your green bean casseroles and your sweet potato pie and turkey and all the fixings and all of that. And we typically don't go that decadent on our everyday. Well, we probably shouldn't, but right? So there are things that are like the flavors, the taste, the colors, the materials, and there are things that God is pointedly saying with the physical things we're touching, tasting, seeing, experiencing, that he's saying, okay, that's a direct correlation or that's a direct image of the spiritual things that we're addressing. And so that's kind of, if you understand that,
they're interlocked.
Yes. And so if you understand that that's a basic premise of how God is interacting with human beings, and the things that are being written down in the Bible are connecting in that way. What physical things were happening that had a direct connection, with the spiritual thing he's trying to communicate. Got it. So your physical actions directly are connected to what you believe. I mean, you look at the book of Hebrews, he's saying, hey, you claim to have great faith, but you don't have any actions that back that up. I'll show you my faith by what I do. And this is not a works-based gospel. Don't hear what I'm not saying. But it is, if you truly believe it, you're going to act on it.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. Right. And so God believes what he's telling us, so he's going to act on it.
Right.
Yeah. And so this whole thing, spoiler alert, is about getting married.
This whole knowing Jesus, accepting in your heart, that's all about getting married.
That's just a part of that's just the beginning.
Right.
Yeah.
This whole relationship with the creator of the world is about getting married.
Yeah.
I dig it.
100%.
Yeah.
And so like I as a single woman myself, I'm in my mid 40s, and so like I haven't been married. And you know what? That was a painful thing for a long time for me. And so learning about this betrothal stuff was actually a very healing thing for me. To learn that, like, I am going to be married someday. And you know what? I get literally the perfect spouse.
Right.
So I got nothing to lose.
And people who may have, and you kind of talked about this during during Sunday.
Yes,
you said
morning,
like,
right.
If you may be from a broken relationship, this is not a reflection on that. Don't feel shame and guilt. This is a showing of what is to come in the perfection of what you will have. Right. I thought that was really, you kind of, at the end of it, you're like, I want to let people know this is not to like demean you for your brokenness. This is to show what's coming. This
is showing like your perfect spiritual spouse is going to make you whole. And his heart. It's like, people don't understand just how loved they actually are. We throw the word love around in our community flippantly, like love wins, love wins, love wins. I agree with that, but not in the way you mean it. Because Jesus wins. And his deep and abiding love for you is far greater than you have any idea. And I don't mean that to sound like pointing a finger at you, but like he cherishes you. He longs to be close to you and to spend time with you, just as think of the person that you've loved the most fiercely in your entire life and multiply that by 1,000,000. And then you might have an idea of how much he loves you. Like your favorite person on the earth that you want to spend every minute you can with them. That's how he is with you. And that's what he longs with you. And it's not because he wants religious activities out of you or behaviors. It's because of his cherishing for you. And so he set this whole thing up before he even created planet Earth. That's what Ephesians 1 tells us, that this whole thing was set up ahead of time. Before sin happened, God had a plan already.
This is already in the works. This was the reason. Yeah.
Yeah.
Part of the kingdom.
Like, maybe we need to hit pause on that and just sit with that thought. Wait, before there was a mess in aisle 3 that needed cleaned up, I was like, well, dang it. Now Adam and Eve messed up. There's sin. There's brokenness. Now I got to spend thousands of years to make that right. No. He had it figured out before it even started.
So you're telling me I wasn't predestined to be grasped from the fire of an angry God, but predestined to be the bride of the most powerful being in existence.
Yeah. And that his heart is actually tender towards you. Whoa.
That's unbelievable.
For some it is, yeah. Does God get angry? Yes, he does. But the kinds of things he gets angry at are when we're harming each other and ourselves and our brokenness and the things he wants to come in and save and heal and fix that we just refuse. Right? And so just to encourage you, how you feeling about that? I feel like I'm poking at
jitters.
Something. Does it?
Yeah.
I can see that makes you uncomfy.
Yeah. It's a different perspective on the theological idea of predestination, or what I thought it was.
I'm poking hard at that, aren't I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least what I thought it might be.
Well, there are
this
two.
Makes a lot more sense, to be honest. Like, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, there are two theological camps that are pretty dominant, and I probably will explain in a way that somebody like, well, that's an oversimplified version of that. Well, maybe. But the Calvinistic side of things, from my understanding, is that they take the Ephesians 1 passage that says that before the foundations of the earth, God predestined us to be to be adopted as sons into the family. And there are people that have taken that to mean that God has handpicked only certain human beings to be saved.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't jive with a lot of other passages in scriptures that, you choose and people are drawn and they have the right to choose. Because if you force someone to love you, is it love? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Not even in arranged marriages.
Not even in arranged marriages. No, you're right.
Pulling it right
Well,
back.
right, let's bring it back around. So,
No, but you can keep going though.
no, you're fine.
There's something to that because people would say in arranged marriages, right?
Yeah.
Well, through what we were this whole conversation, that's not. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, we're fine. You're tracking. So, right, and then the Arminianist side of things leans, no, clearly we're allowed to choose, and then they fight over who's right.
Mm-hmm.
This is my own term. I didn't read this anywhere, but I consider myself a betrothalist. And after our time together today, you'll understand why I consider myself that, because I think both arguments are partially right, but they're missing a really key ingredient in their thinking on this, because they're thinking about it from one side of the relationship. They're not taking both sides of the relationship, and it's a relationship. They're not taking that into consideration, and so they're partially right.
Mm.
Yeah. So yeah, this is poking pretty hardcore at people's understanding of what does it mean to be predestined.
Mm-hmm.
Before the creation of the earth, God had a plan to rescue you, to redeem you, and to bring you to Him if you care to do so. He's not going to force you though, because that's not what a gentleman does.
So that's where the arrangement, like when we think arranged marriage, kind of lines up. Your first point here is like talking about how this is an arranged marriage. So how does that work?
Okay, so there are 4 sections. Great. So we're going to take it back to the notes, and then we've got a lot to unpack. So we'll try to keep it on track for you guys, so we're not here for 5 hours.
We're here until Noah wakes up.
Oh, yeah. Well, fair enough. She's the boss. So there are 4 sections to the marriage process. The first is the arranging of the marriage. And some of you are going to grate at that just thinking that. Like, biblical marriages are arranged, like, we'll address that. And then the second process, once the arrangement has been brought through, the second part is the betrothal. And that's where we think of it as engagement today. When then you have your fiance. Well, biblically, that was a much more serious thing, because at the end of that process, you were legally husband and wife, but you weren't allowed to come together as husband and wife just yet. There was a time of separation and preparation. And that's the time of waiting, which is the third part of this process, where the bride and groom are preparing for their future together, separately, in their own areas. And then the happy moment of the big wedding and all the fun things of bringing that all together. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So what has this got to do with following Jesus? Well, quite a lot. In fact, there are some things that you think, okay, well, that was cool that Jesus did that, but okay. But I was always the kid in my head when people talk about things, especially at church stuff. I'm like, well, why did he do that? Like, okay, the thing that got this whole thing triggered for me of making these connections is, why did Jesus need to get baptized? He's perfect without sin. He didn't need to get cleansed of any sin of any kind. He's already one with the Father. So what's that all about? Now, if the Father says he needed to do it, okay, he's being obedient, great, but he could be obedient in other ways. Why did he need to get baptized? I didn't have an understanding of that until I learned about the marriage betrothal stuff. I was like, oh, that's why. Oh, well, of course he needed to get baptized. That makes total sense.
Part of the process.
It's part of the preparation for what's coming. Yeah. It's not because he was compelled to do something random. It was actually part of the whole plan, which is great. It's like those great heist movies. I'm dating myself when I say this, but I remember
Ocean's 11.
Ocean's 11. Yeah. Oh my goodness! Or even The Italian Job. Yeah. There's all these components, but especially the Ocean's 11. There's all these components that are going behind the scenes, and you're watching this thing unfold, not knowing most of that background. You're going, how the heck did they pull that off? And then they show you what, and they're like, oh, of course that's why it worked that way.
Right.
Yeah. So this is kind of like that. So it's kind of like a spiritual heist, if you will. So buckle in. All right. So the arrangement starts. Again, this is biblical process of marriage that is still being used today in the Middle East, where the father of the groom finds a bride for his son. That's the dad's job. His job is to find a bride for his son. Now, one of the things we need to keep in mind is the family name and the family line is one of the most important and treasured things in that culture. In our Western culture, we're very individual. We'll pull up my own bootstraps and make something of myself and go do my own thing and be very independent. But if you're in a desert situation, you don't have Walmart right down the street. If you try to do everything on your own, you will not survive. The bigger your family is, the more hands that help to get the work done, your survival rate goes up, and so does your ability to have, wealth and comfort in your life. So a large family was pragmatic, very practical. It was a thing that made sure everybody's needs got, and then if people coming at you, it's a way to stay protected as well.
Right.
So large families was a security thing. It was safety. It was provision. It was so the family name continuing and having a good reputation and knowing that if you give your word to something, that your family can be trusted is huge. If you can't make treaties with other tribes or other villages and be trusted to follow through, people won't make covenant agreements with you, and then
they won't trade with you.
They don't want to trade with you.
Mess with you at all.
Right. Which means your survival is at stake. So you have to understand a person's reputation, their character, their ability to add to the family physically, not just with financial means, but like physically with people, was a huge part of survival. And so that's why it was a huge core value. And so the idea of a person getting married and a young lady being upset that she can't have kids isn't just because she wants to be a mother, but because her value is tied up in adding to the family name and adding to the value and the wealth and the sustainability of the family that I'm a part of. And that was an important role she played, and she took it very seriously. Is this making sense?
Yeah.
So from our Western lenses, sometimes we can take offense to their perspective, but we don't live in the environment they did. And so that can kind of play into that. So, sorry, I'm going a little bit down.
No, that's very helpful.
So please understand that the way things were arranged was like the father of the groom's job was to find a young lady who was of high character. Like, she's not someone who's playing the field constantly because they don't have paternity tests.
Right.
So if she's playing the field and she gets married to his son, the children that are coming from her, are they his grandchildren?
What's the question? Right.
Yeah, we don't want to have to question where these kids are coming from, because that's inheritance. That's the family line. Like, okay, and that also is the security for everybody involved. So the young lady is very important. Don't think of her as a piece of property, because they definitely did not. And they had a very clear understanding. Without woman, there is no family. So females were treated with very high respect, unlike what you might be seeing in some Middle Eastern cultures today, with the hijab and the face coverings and the minimizing of women. That is not, biblical culture was not like that. They had a really high honor and respect for women and their value and the role they played in making the family secure. They just had different roles. So the father of the groom's job was to find someone. Now, that doesn't mean that the groom didn't have any say, okay? Because, we have clear examples of like, hey, Dad, I like that chick. Let's go make the arrangements. So,
talk to her, Dad.
Hey, Dad, she's cute. I like her. Like, okay, well, let me check out the family. And then the whole family is involved in the conversation. Right. Mom is consulted, aunties and uncles, because of what do we know about this family? And then the father of the groom and the father of the bride get together and they have conversation. Do you agree that my son is of high character, that you agree that your daughter is okay to become a part of our family? Are you okay with our families becoming a team? And so it wasn't just...
Because it is a connection.
Right. Remember, this is about building families. This is about building community. This is for the betterment of everybody. Yeah. And so...
They're not living solo in North Carolina by themselves.
No.
They're going to be a part of your everyday for the rest of your life.
Right, and they're small enough communities that you would know, and a lot of them might be distant related, like cousins, like second or third. But like the family, they would have known the girl. The family would have looked into, yeah. So this was a community decision. Now, does that mean that there's no love? No. A lot of times, the young man and young lady would know each other because villages are small. Think about like smaller high schools. Everybody pretty much knows everybody, right? So love matches were also a part of that. And if she didn't know him, there was a time before, like between the arrangement and like the betrothal ceremony, where she had a chance to suss him out a little bit and say, okay, he's got too many pimples and warts, and he's ugly, and he smells funny, and no thanks.
And he doesn't treat waitresses well, or you know what I mean, like all those like things of
you're paying attention, like how does he treat his mother,
right?
That kind of stuff. Same advice that our parents are giving us today. So, just know that like there's time, but the arrangement was part of the community decision to build the family. And so if you're looking at, okay, how does that connect with the betrothal process? Because Timon asked me because I normally like to just explain the original and then go through and talk about how does that apply to Christ. But I think we're going to just do it as we go. So what is the evidence for the father of the groom? So who's the father of the groom in the Trinity?
Yeah, God.
God the Father, the Ancient of Days, the one that sits on the throne. Well, that's what Ephesians 1 is actually talking about. The Father made plans before he created planet Earth to have us adopted into the family. Well, adopted how?
Through marriage.
Through marriage.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah. He chose us to be his in-laws.
Yeah, for his son.
Right, for his son.
And his son may be like,
hey, Dad, she's kind of cute.
Yeah.
That bride down there, she's something. It's like, yeah, I know, I got a plan. Okay. So the Father made a plan before he created Earth, okay? And, 2 Peter 3, 9 and 10 says that God doesn't want anyone to perish, but everyone to come to faith through repentance. So, again, the Armenian perspective, choice. God is not offering this to just some people. He's offering it to everybody. Okay, so the arrangement was set up before Jesus came on the scene, okay? All right, so let's move into the betrothal process. So, pardon me while I put my glasses on here.
Go for it.
I can actually read my notes. This is good. Okay. So what happens is after the arrangement is agreed on, then they come together at the girl's home, and they have a chuppah, which is a white canopy, and there's a glass of wine passed around. First to the parents and any other family members that might be there, but for sure it's at least the parents of both of the young people getting married. And then it comes to the groom first. He drinks some of the wine, and then he makes wedding vows to her that he's going to love you. I promise that I'm going to love you and treasure you and care for you, protect you, provide for you a place to live that's safe, provide for your needs physically, emotionally, and spiritually to the best of my ability, and I will lay down my life in order to make that happen. I will die for you in order to make sure that you are okay. I'm going to put your needs above my own.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, after he's made that and he has drunk from the cup, like that seals that his vows, he can't back out from them at that point. After he has made those promises to her, he hands the glass to her. And at that point, she can choose. See, it's not like arranged marriages that we've heard of in, maybe from like Western cowboy movies or something, where arranged marriages, the girl has no say and she's like sold off like a piece of property. That's not how this process works.
Or here's a 90-year-old dude getting a young girl.
A young 12-year-old.
He's rich and yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, you hear that from like back in the day, right?
Which that might have happened, I don't know, in some other cultures, but
yeah. This in this scenario, the bride gets to choose whether she wants, and
she has the right to refuse.
I know you're going to tie this into,
but you can jump the gun. That's fine. Go for it.
It's such a clear choice. Here is what I'm going to do for you, and I'm going to die for you, and I do it. Here's the vow. I drink the cup. Now it's your turn to say, do you accept it or not? Right. Like, it's such a clear picture of Christ and us.
Neon sign, pointing finger, blink,
blink.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so clear.
It's very clear.
The vows are pretty early on in the process.
They are.
It's like the first.
He's making the commitment to her. Maybe they knew each other. They might not, but he's still making that promise to her.
Yeah.
So this is like the engagement ring,
Mm-hmm.
almost. Like, in a way, the engagement ring doesn't really live up to that level of promise, I guess.
No, it really doesn't.
Because you're not.
I promise to make vows to you at some point.
Yeah, that's kind of what.
Kind of cheapens the whole thing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I promise to. I promise to say yes to you eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's not meant to cheapen our process that we do in any way, but this hits much harder. Like for a young man to present this and to make that commitment to her before she's even agreed, he really has to put himself out there.
He puts it all on the line.
He puts it all on the line for her and like, hey, I'm literally putting my life on the line for you. So it's not like he's going into this marriage and it's going to cost him nothing and her everything.
Mm-hmm.
He has to pay the price first. Okay, good. I see that's hitting pretty good too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Dig it.
So, yeah. Now, if she takes the cup and says yes, she drinks from the wine and makes vows of her own. And her job in this process is she promises to remain pure, no sex with anyone, and to give herself only to her groom. You have to understand that once she enters into that covenant agreement of betrothal and drinks from that, it's sealed, which is an understanding that if she breaks that, it's the death penalty. Period. Why? Because the family's survival depends on her purity. Let me say that again. Her family's survival is dependent on her purity. The children that are coming from her, are they the family line or not? Can she be trusted? It's a big deal. And so that whole situation with Mary being pregnant out of wedlock, obviously supernaturally by the Lord, and Joseph, what is he supposed to do with that? He was a good man. He didn't want her to die. He clearly loved her and cared for her.
Mm-hmm.
But he also knew, that's not my kid. To have an angelic visitation actually convince him, oh my goodness, right? Wow. So after the drinking of the wine, to seal the betrothal, the engagement portion of this, there's a marriage contract called a ketubah. I hope I'm saying that correctly. I might not be. But it's basically saying what the bride is bringing to the marriage, what the groom is bringing to the marriage. But it needs to be noted here, again, marriage is about extending the family. So if they have children and then there's a divorce that happens later, the children belong to the dad because it's family. It's the family line. She shows herself unfaithful and he divorces her. She is sent out. The kids stay. She doesn't have any legal right to them, which just mind-boggling to us in our culture and the way we work today.
Right. But if you look, I'm going to go back to what we said at the start, that the spiritual and physical are interlocked here. Mm-hmm. And when you see it on the spiritual level, it's like, whoa.
Whoa. Yeah. Right. So there are some ramifications for some of this that we're going to come back to here in a minute. So again, more spiritual connection that are both physical and spiritual at the same time. So Old Testament, the covenant agreement between God and Abraham was considered a spiritual marriage by the Jewish people that I've been told. I've had a couple of different rabbis I've had conversation with about this. But the one that is especially considered as a spiritual marriage between a group of people and the God of heaven is the covenant that happened at Mount Sinai. Mm-hmm. With the Jewish people after God had rescued them miraculously out of Egypt. Yeah. Right?
So when Moses went up?
Yeah, Moses went up on the Mount Sinai, and that's what the Ten Commandments are about. The Ten Commandments, a lot of people don't know this, is actually just a summary statement of the first 5 books of the Bible.
It's the ketubah?
Yeah, it is. No, you're right.
Yeah.
The Ten Commandments are the ketubah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's the vows. This is what's going to happen.
Yeah. Love me and love me only. Oh, does that sound like a bride supposed to be staying pure for her groom?
Yeah.
So if you're reading an Old Testament stuff and it's God's complaint is you're prostituting yourself with foreign gods, well, they were physically doing immoral acts with the priest and priestesses and the the temples, the pagan temples. They were physically having sexual intercourse with the priests and priestesses for false gods. They were literally physically doing something that was also showing spiritually what they were doing.
Yeah.
They weren't remaining faithful to their spiritual spouse. Is this making sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm tracking.
Yeah. So, this whole so the point I made Sunday was this idea of a spiritual marriage between the God of heaven and human beings is not brand new. Like, God established it with the Jewish people first, and I don't want to go too much in the weeds on that, but just like I'm gonna leave that hang there and let people consider that and chew on that. Okay, so when the ceremony is done, the groom has to pay a huge dowry. Huge.
It's the biggest.
It's the best.
It's the best.
Yes.
The most dowry.
Yeah, I think it's a couple years' income.
Yeah.
Something like that. Now, a couple of things. This is why grooms tend to be a little older than the girls, because they had to train as an apprentice and learn a trade and then be able to save up enough money to build their own house with their own hands with all the supplies, and then also save up enough money to have a dowry to afford to get married, and then be able to live for an entire year without working. So it's going to take, he has to work hard to get his wife, and then he has to pay a big price to get her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
Can't do that right out of high school.
no, definitely not.
Right.
But that depends on his upbringing too, and the kind of trade that his family's involved in, and also
Jewish
remember,
high school, whatever that was. Sorry, go ahead.
Hillel? No, that's probably not right. Sorry if I got that wrong. Yeah. So, but also remember, he would have been living at home. His family would have been helping him with that. Like, hey, whatever you're earning for your earnings, put that in savings. The family's going to work together to help him accomplish this. So again, he's not independently having to live on his own to get this.
Yeah,
to
he's
happen.
not paying rent and lights and electric. No, he's just now saving for.
Yeah, got to save up, and the family would be behind that. Again, we work as a team. Right. And so this whole thing is a team effort. So the dowry is huge. And it would be appropriate to what he would be able to make. Like, the dowry wouldn't be something that like a multimillionaire would have to pay. But if you're a multimillionaire, your dowry is going to be much bigger than an average, the plumber. They did have those.
Really?
Yeah. Anyway, that's a side note. Sorry. Okay. Now, if things go down where they end up getting divorced, he has to pay her entire dowry in full, because she has no way to make a living. And, in hopes that she might be able to get married again, but who knows how long that'll take. And so he has to be able to provide for her so that she doesn't just die. Right. So there's honor. There's supposed to be honor in that. And also, if he changes his mind again, because you know how people are, and wants to remarry her. I mean, we've heard stories of people getting divorced and remarried several times. So if he remarries her, he has to pay the dowry a third time. I think God also wants you to know this is important and don't take it lightly.
Yeah.
So, because it's a model of his relationship with us.
Yeah.
So he doesn't want us to take it flippantly. So this is not meant to be a commentary on people's lives or their choices or just events that have happened. Okay. But just know that marriage is important, and God takes it seriously. And it's because he wants you to know the good and beautiful things that a good marriage can be.
Yeah.
As a picture of what we can have with him. Yeah. So cool.
So what's the dowry what's the dowry that God paid for his spiritual bride?
We're going to get to that like in moments. So I have one more thing to point out. Okay, so as soon as this betrothal thing is done, they are legally married, and then they go through baptism. In that culture, it's known as a mikveh. Okay, they go through a ritual immersion, which is a sign of my single life is now done. I'm going down under the water. My singleness has now died, and I'm stepping out of the water as a new person that is married to you, and everything I do from this moment forward is a reflection of that new reality. And the man goes first. And then she goes after.
Yeah. Which, let's go back to what you're talking about with Jesus in his baptism.
Right.
He's saying, from now on, my ministry started. I'm going after
my woman.
my bride.
Yeah, I'm going after her.
Which is us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's where it was like very significant that he did get baptized. Therefore, the dove and all the different pieces.
This is my son in whom I'm well pleased. Why was it so important for everybody to know that Jesus was God's son? Well, first of all, validating he was not a bastard child, right? To validating that he is who he says he is. But also, he's the son who is the father has chosen the bride for. It's layered. You'll find that some of these things that happen have multiple reasons why they happened.
Yeah.
And so it's a multiple layered thing, right?
That's awesome.
And why was the dove there?
Peace.
Well, yeah, it was the Holy Spirit's presence.
Ah.
Right. But I might get ahead of myself. What's the dowry?
Mm-hmm. Well.
Okay, so let me get to that.
I think it's probably multi-layered too.
Oh, you think? Maybe just a little bit? Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about how the betrothal process, because betrothal process has already been established for us spiritually. Yeah. So I mentioned on Sunday, what was the first miracle Jesus did?
Water, wine.
Changing water into wine.
Right.
At a...
it's a wedding.
It's at a wedding.
Yeah.
Huh. Why did he do that? Oh, because before the foundations of the earth, the Father chose us to be his. And so Jesus is like, okay, I'm preparing for the betrothal. Yeah. His ministry began with water into wine, and his ministry ended at the Last Supper, offering the cup of wine, and said, anybody that drinks this is now going to be in a covenant relationship with me. This is now the new covenant. So it started with wine, it ended with wine.
The betrothal process is like everyone drinks wine. The family drinks wine, then he does, and then it's a whole.
He offers it to the bride. That's right. So this whole water into wine at a wedding was a major signal, and it was actually an expectation of the rabbis, the Jewish teachers of the day, because ever since the time of Moses, they had this expectation, hey, when the Messiah shows up on the scene, he's going to turn water into wine. Because the Nile River was turned red with blood out of judgment for all the babies that were murdered. But when the bridegroom comes, he's going to turn water to wine at the wedding. So they had this expectation. So what's the first thing Jesus does? He meets their expectation by saying, water into wine at a wedding. I'm here. It's me. I'm the guy. But that's why it's so curious, because he even, you'll notice in the story that he even kind of argued with his mom about it. I'm like, Mom, it's not time yet. It's like, just do whatever he says. If you read the story closely, you'll also notice that like the only people that actually knew Jesus did that was just the servants and a couple of his guys that were with him at that point. So this was not a big smashing public thing that hundreds of people knew about. Right. And it was actually about protecting the family friends that did not have adequate supplies for the wedding feast. Right. To save them from shame and embarrassment. And it would have been catastrophic for their family. So Jesus was coming in clutch,
That's
as
crazy.
he does.
Yeah.
Okay.
It all ties together.
It does. It totally does. And so that's, so he does the water into wine, and then he goes into the wilderness and fasting for 40 days. He's got the whole temptation and testing that's going on there. And that's just, again, testing his character, testing his, is he going to be the kind of guy that, what the Father says, will I do? Right. Is he obedient? Is he a man of character? And can he be trusted not to succumb to what the enemy wants? And clearly he passed with flying colors. And then the next thing, like he shows his character, he's tested, showing that he's prepared and ready to step into ministry. That was the third layer of what the baptism was about, was showing his complete surrender and obedience to the Father, to do as he says and to go where he leads, because it was after the baptism. He's now said goodbye to his young childhood life, his single life, and now he's eyes on the prize, preparing his bride for betrothal, and then paying the price for that. Like this the whole buildup here. And so jumping to the end of his physical ministry and his first coming was the Passover meal. This is what we'd celebrate and remember in our communion is, they had this big meal. There are 4 major cups that are celebrated there. The cup of sanctification means I'm going to bring you out of bondage. The cup of deliverance, I'm going to set you free so you can go, like you're no longer bondage, but now you actually can go live free. And the third cup is the cup of redemption. I'm going to redeem you. Again, that's paying the price so that there's not a bounty over your head. I'm going to literally take care of everything. Heal your wounds, set you free, give you the means to go live free. So it's not like, hey, you're out of jail. Good luck with that. No, he's going to give you all the resources you need to live the way you need to. But the last cup is called a cup of praise. And that's, those are the wedding vows kind of side of thing, that I will take you as my people. And that's where this whole idea of marriage is tied to the covenants comes from, because it's when the groom says to his bride, I take you to be my wife and I will be your husband. And she says, and I take you to be my husband and I will be your wife. And we're committing to being pure for each other. And so this marriage, like, I will take you as my people and I will be your God, is wedding vows.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'll take care of you. I'll provide for you. I'll protect you. I'll care for you. But you have to do your side and be pure for me.
I'm gonna go back to Allison's question. What?
Yeah. Did I answer it, by the way?
No. What do you? Well, I mean, I know kind of the dowry that God paid the Jewish people, right?
Okay, so the dowry God paid for the Jewish people was what?
Gold. Tons and tons and tons of gold.
Well, yes, but he also redeemed them with a mighty hand. That's what the whole Passover meal is remembering their freedom. Their bondage is broken. They're being brought out of the country where they were enslaved, and then he's giving them the means to live free as his people.
Right.
So Jesus, God the Father, rescuing the Jewish people out of Egypt and that slavery and bondage, that was the redemptive piece. There was a high price. And yes, we talked on Sunday about how, when they're in the wilderness and the Bible's talking about them having all this gold, like to donate to build all the things that need to go in the tabernacle as they're wandering in the wilderness, like solid gold lids and 7-foot tall menorah things. Like what? Where did that come from? They were slaves.
From the Egyptians.
They plundered the land as they left. People were like just giving them, get out. They were giving them all the stuff as they were leaving. And it was funny because I was pondering that one day, and I just sensed the Lord saying to me, back pay.
Yeah.
400 years of slavery where they weren't paid for their wages. I guess they got paid.
And a dowry.
Yeah, and now it's the dowry.
I love that.
Yeah.
What do you think the dowry for what we're given?
Okay,
like
so how does that
Christians.
work with Jesus?
Yeah.
Right, well, so here we are, Passover, last meal. We're getting to you, Allison. Thanks for being
Is that your question?
Yeah, we're getting there. Okay, so the third cup comes around, the cup of redemption. And this is the cup that Jesus uses. And we know this because the first two cups of where they happen, and they said it was like the midpoint of the meal. We know that the third cup was the one he's talking about just because of where it's at and what they were the activities they were doing. And he says, this now is the new covenant that is promised in Jeremiah 33 that will save you from your sins in a single day. And then everybody is supposed to have their own cup of wine at this meal, but he takes his cup and passes it around to his guys and says, anyone that drinks of this is now in this new covenant with me. And it's layered in the understanding. This is the bridegroom passing around the cup of wine. Are you going to say yes to me spiritually as a spouse? Okay, this is not any immoral thing. It's about a spiritual covenant marriage. And so... Now remember, what does the groom promise to do?
Take care of them and build a house for them and all, all this stuff.
Yeah, build a house, protect, care for, provide, and if I have to, I will die in order to provide that.
Mm-hmm.
And then what does he do? He leaves the table. He doesn't finish the Passover meal. He doesn't drink the fourth cup of praise. He even says, I'm not going to drink wine again until I get to come back. Well, why not?
Because it's not the wedding day.
Is wine now evil?
No.
Sin to drink? No,
it's not the wedding day yet.
It's not the wedding day yet. It's not time.
Right.
It's not part of the process. And so what does he do? He goes out and prays in the garden, gets arrested, and then he's crucified.
Dies.
His perfect body dying on the cross, and the blood that's shed there is him literally paying the dowry to have you as his bride. Yeah. And that's the price he paid, his life. Well, thank goodness he didn't stay dead, did he?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, yeah, so 3 days later, surprise, I'm back. Okay, hangs out with this guy, preaching on the kingdom, teaching him how it works. And he's actually taking him through the passages in Scripture like Psalm 22, Psalm 23, Isaiah 53, Daniel 9. Like there's several passages that explain why he had to die and be left with nothing, to be cut off and left with nothing. Because that was the price that was paid. In order to, because of our sin and our brokenness, we belong in the kingdom of darkness. We belong to Satan's world until we're redeemed out of it. We're in bondage to that. He had to die and shed his blood and be the perfect sin-free life in order to be the amount that it cost to set us free. Is that making sense?
Yeah.
So it's a huge price to pay. But it's not the end of the story, is it? It's just like you're only at like the halfway point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a lot of people, I feel like they approach this idea of salvation as like an ending point. Like, okay, I've arrived, I've got my salvation. It's a major moment. Don't be fooled. But and maybe that wasn't the right way to say it. But yeah, like it's a much bigger deal than maybe we understand. That it's actually meant to be the beginning of something much bigger.
Yeah, like you said, it's just we're at the betrothal.
Yeah, we're just that's
Or the vows. I'm sorry. The 4 points are
yeah. So arrangement,
betrothal,
right?
Arrangement, betrothal.
Then what's next? Do you remember?
Then the time of waiting.
The time of waiting.
Which is what we're in now, I would assume.
Yes, now we come to the time of waiting. Okay, so we've talked a lot about this Jesus stuff, and you're like, oh my goodness, this is, for some people, this may be a lot of reframing.
Yeah.
Taking some things they might already be familiar with. You might be brand new to this, and that's okay. We're just happy you're here.
Yeah.
Like,
in this audio, you can go back and listen again. There's a video. You just keep rewinding.
Keep doing the things.
Until you figure it out.
Exactly. Yeah. So the time of waiting. So listen, the bride and groom know there's a time coming where they have to be separated from each other. And they've got to be busy about the things that they need to be doing to be prepared to enter into this new life together. So his job is, before he leaves, though, he leaves a present.
A gift, a token.
A gift, a token, and usually I would imagine it's not like, hey, I found this string over here and just put it around your finger, and if you're missing me, look at this piece of string. No, I think this is probably, I don't know this for sure, but I have a strong suspicion this is where the idea of an engagement ring comes from, because it's something of great worth that she can look at that and know he's already paid a lot to invest in this promise of our future life together. And so if you're struggling with how long it's taking for this process to be finished, remember I love you and that I am going to stand by my word to come get you. Right?
Which is the Holy Spirit.
Jumping
the gun.
You are so jumping the gun. Yeah, I mean, that's what the day of Pentecost was all about.
Yeah.
Jesus said, look, you need to stay in Jerusalem and pray because I have to go.
Right.
I have to go. And you know, there's some curious theological things that have been postulated because, you know, when the disciples asked Jesus, well, when are you coming back? When's the kingdom of heaven, like, full on, going to be fully physically and spiritually present, like, boom. In real life here, not just kind of, they're close, but not like, whoa, you know. He says, well, I don't know the answer to that. Only the Father knows that. Well, people have taken that to mean that Jesus wasn't God and wasn't all-knowing.
Right.
And I can see why they might think that, but
if you understand,
if you know the marriage process,
right.
Like, let me show you why. Okay, so the time of waiting, his job, the groom's job, was to go and build a home for his wife,
right,
and his future family. And it's going to take him a minimum of a year. But if any of you have done house renovations, you know things always take way longer than you want them to. You think, oh yeah, I can get this knocked out in 6 months.
Every project is
18 months later. You're like, this is ever going to end.
3 times longer, 3 times the cost.
Yeah,
typically.
Basically, yes. And he needs to do the work himself. And so, when do you think the groom is going to be able to come get his bride?
When it's done.
When it's done. But who is it up to? Is it up to the groom to say, yeah, that's good enough, I'm going to get her. Let's go. No. Okay, the guy that made the arrangement, like, I did a good job finding a good future wife for you. You going to make sure this house is prepared for her. Like, it needs to be as good or better of a home than she's leaving. And that trim better be up, and it better be painted, and electrical wiring needs to be taken care of. That toilet better be flushing, like
The upstairs shower better be working.
yeah, and all the little details.
Yeah.
Right. So it's up to the groom's dad to make sure that everything is ready and in place before. Yeah, okay, son, you can go get her. Okay.
Is that house the new earth? Like when there's reference to that? Is that what?
Well, yeah. So back to the
Or the New Jerusalem.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I wouldn't be. It wouldn't surprise me if that's a major component to it. But I think it's much bigger than just the New Jerusalem, because the New Jerusalem is 1,500 miles cubed.
Yeah.
So think of this big old square sticking off the side of planet Earth. It's going to be wild, and it's lit up green, 24/7, 365. It's a glowing box on the side of planet Earth. This is pretty wild stuff. That's for another day, of course. But, okay, I think it may actually be the entire universe.
Oh.
I think there's...
It's putting everything in order.
He's putting it all in order. And that may also be things here, too. I don't know the full answer to that question. It's a good one, though. It's a great question. So I lost my train of thought.
So Jesus is going and getting things in order, and he doesn't know when it's going to be ready until God says, hey, this is good to go. Now come back and
the Ancient
grab
of Days, Dad. Dad's the one that says, I get to come back and get you.
So the groom is building the house. Oh. What's the bride doing?
What's the bride doing?
Mm-hmm.
Is that all the groom is doing, or is that?
He's building the house. He's preparing for their life together, getting things in order. That way,
he's not working, right? I mean, in the marriage, or is he working and building the house?
I guess it would be that question. I'm not sure of. I would imagine the family is super focused on helping him get where he needs to be.
Yeah.
But I would imagine he probably still has work responsibilities as well. So it just depends. There's a good friend of mine, our family actually, who is a professional bus driver over in Israel, that went through this whole process. And I've known him over a span of nearly 20 years. And when we first met him, he was freshly betrothed to a young lady, and he was so excited. And the way they, like, if their houses are in the mountains, they, like, mom and dad will have a first floor flat, right? And then they have, but you see these big rebar things sticking out the top. Well, that's because the first floor is the first son. And he builds his house there. And then the second son builds on top of that. And then the third son, and so forth. So it depends on how many. And then the family all lives in the same, like, think of it as like an apartment complex. It's all your family. Mm-hmm. You have your own living space, but you're all also next door neighbors. And so he actually, it was crazy. I don't have permission to share a lot of the details. I want to respect his privacy, but there were a lot of hardships that he went through that our family was helpful with. And one of the trips we got to go back, I think it was 2011. We got to go back and see him, and like one of the off nights that we had in Jerusalem, he's like, "Oh, come, I want you to meet my family," which is huge. Like, it's not a normal thing to meet people's families that you're doing tours with over there. And he brought us to our home. He took us through every room in his house and showed us all the things he did, and all, like, I did this trimming, I did this here. I was so proud of it. Like, he was so proud to show us his hard work, the home he built. And he was on the second or third floor up, and his parents were on the bottom floor. And then,
wow.
Like, so, right. And then we got to meet his wife and his sister-in-law, and then he paraded all of his children in front of us so we could meet them. Like, it was this big deal because there was a very serious situation that had happened that the Lord used us to help intervene. And this man, to my knowledge right now, I don't know if he follows Jesus or not, but boy, was that huge. And then for me to see, no, actually, they still follow this process. And there was this long time of waiting when, like, tourism went through the floor because of things happening. And he had everything saved up to be able to get married. And then he had to wait because her family was like, you're not showing you can provide. And so when he could save up enough money and his job was going again, he had to wait several years.
Oh, wow.
Like 2 or 3 years in order to be married. And so we watched him go through this whole process. So it doesn't always go smoothly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that was pretty amazing. Again, I want to respect his privacy as far as some of that stuff, but just know it was like, oh my goodness, like getting to be introduced to his family and go, like, we had this big meal, and my mom and my another friend were like wanting to help clean up the dishes, and it was like, no, don't touch the dishes. In our culture, to help clean up is like, a kindness. And to them, it's like, no, we're here to honor you. Don't like, you weren't here as servants to clean up after the meal. So that there's just things like that was just really amazing to be able to experience that. Okay, so we're in the time of waiting.
Yeah, what's the bride doing?
What's the bride doing?
Thank you, Allison.
Yeah, she loves to just bring it back around, right? So her job is to get everything ready. I'm feeling compelled to talk about two things. The bride's job is to be ready for her groom to come back for her. And it's amazing to me that there are a lot of believers out there that might not know, or actually don't know, that Jesus is actually physically coming back for you. Yeah. And it's not just like when you pass away, but there is a moment promised where he's coming back to rescue you out of this situation. So just know that that's a thing. Okay. But what are we doing? How are we preparing for our forever life with him? Because we have time now to be doing that. I'm asking questions for you guys. Are there thoughts? What do you think? What are things we could be doing?
Giving gifts. So
Okay.
you can steward those gifts. It's like the talents, right? You go into you're trying stuff. You're working through things. You're kind of trying to understand to hear him better. You're trying to grow in him, in relationship with him. Like those are some of those aspects.
This is your time to suss them out,
Yeah.
right? I mean, for some people who haven't said yes to Jesus right now, this is your time. Like now, because you're listening to this, you know what he's offering you. For you to kind of think about, do I want to drink from that cup and enter into a relationship with Jesus where it's going to be literally a forever thing, where he promises to protect me and provide for me, and that he can cure and heal any of my wounds. Yeah, it's pretty wild stuff. So people can suss that out and decide, is that something I want to choose to be a part of or not? Okay. Then there's also, if you have made that choice, there's work to do. Like the Lord gives gifts to all of his children, all of them. The Father gives the gifts. And so probably a good idea to figure out what those gifts are and then start working on learning how to use them and use them in a way that honors your groom. And the fruit of the Spirit is going to be your guide. Mm-hmm. Does it grow joy? Does it grow peace, kindness, gentleness, patience? Does it help self-control? Which I think some people probably think that's a weird fruit, but boy, it's actually a big deal. I'd actually encourage you, if you ever have a chance, to check out Graham Cook's conversation on the spiritual fruits, and especially his conversation on self-control. It's really interesting, and I found it really helpful. But we don't have time to get into that tonight. Time of waiting. Yeah. So what about purity? I'm cringing right now.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah. Falling after other gods.
Yeah, it's not just about sexual purity, although that's important.
Like loyalty to God.
Yeah. And yes, exactly. It's am I keeping myself pure for my bride or my groom, excuse me? But what am I chasing after? What am I pursuing? What am I consuming with my eyes? What am I consuming with my ears? And not to be hyper religious or super controlling about it at all, but what is your heart motivation? Are the things that you're participating in or reading or listening to, or the things you're doing, is that encouraging you to grow? Is it encouraging you in your fruit, your good spiritual fruit? Is it helping others to do the same? Again, it's not meant to be a guilt trip, but those are questions just to ask and kind of run. Okay. And there are good things that you can be doing that are neutral. Like I'm a musician, I play my instrument. So is it an honoring thing to Jesus if I use my music talents? Well, sure it is. But if I have to choose between that and maybe preparing a lesson or a podcast with you, I'm going to lean to the preparing the podcast because that's more groom focused. And so for me, that's a priority. And so that's what I'm going to choose. Now, it doesn't mean that I can't play my instrument, because I do, but just that it's a priority issue. And so I just encourage people to figure out what your giftings are. And it can be any number of things. It doesn't have to be,
one thing.
And honestly, it can change as the seasons of your life change. And boy, I wish someone had explained that to me when I was in my 20s. Seasons of life are a thing. And then the people you're interacting with, where you're living, those kinds of things can shift what you need to be doing. And it's a good thing to just keep a pulse on that. So, and if you're not sure, you can just ask Jesus to help you figure it out, and maybe bring in people that connect to you and can help you.
Yeah.
The current church community I'm a part of, I mean, I was already doing okay going in a particular direction, but when I got connected to them, it was like somebody turned on the stadium lights for me as far as giftings I kind of knew were there but didn't really understand. And whoa, the things that I was able to start growing and learning, unbelievable. It's exciting. It's fun. By the way, did you know your spirituality can be fun?
Yeah.
What? It doesn't have to be serious and like heavy and all the time. No.
Gregorian chants only.
Yeah. Oh, actually, Gregorian chants are pretty cool.
No, I know. I dig them.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
cool.
I would get massages, and they're like, "What do you want to listen to?"
Oh,
like,
no, of course you
Gregorian
do.
chants only, and they're the most relaxing massages.
Yeah.
Shout out to our sponsor.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, right.
Quiet River Massage and Revival.
Yeah, she'll put on Gregorian chants for you if you ask. I'm not joking.
No, I know you're not. Well, it's funny because when I was in college, there was some Gregorian. There was a group of monks that put out a recording, and it was actually a pretty people were all about it, and I actually enjoyed it too. I was like, oh, I found it very calming actually. Yeah. So, all right. So the time of waiting, it's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if you love Jesus and you're the bride, you got work to do. Don't just sit on your couch and eat chocolate bonbons all day. Thank you. I say that all the time. Don't just sit on your couch.
It's not fire insurance. And you're
okay, Jesus, do all the work for me.
Yeah.
It's like a time of decision and honing of the gifts, I think.
Yeah, and I think there's a direct correlation too. I mean, the parable of the talents. Let's talk about that. So it says that it doesn't say that everybody gets the same amount of gifting, right? But what Jesus promises, as you use what you've been given, if you steward it well, you're going to be given more. But if you don't do anything with what he's given, he's going to give it to somebody else who will do something with it. And so I don't know that Jesus is being super ugly about it, but just be aware, right?
Yeah.
And so we're given stuff to work with. Let's use some, and that's, as you grow in your giftings, you grow in the authority you carry to help other people. Yeah. Okay, and that authority is going to directly translate to the spirit realm on the other side of things.
Let me pull it back to the process that they would go through. So the bride, this is something you teached on, is what during this time of waiting, what she was doing was building the house out and getting stuff ready for the house that the groom is building. Yeah,
the groom's building the physical building, and her job is to get stuff that's on the inside of the house ready.
So she's getting the stuff ready, and then when she moves in the house, she's going to be using that stuff. So the stuff we're working on now, when we move in, we're going to be operating it in that and way more.
Yeah.
Because I thought of it like the way you kind of put it was the bride in this waiting process is, what stuff do I need to buy from the kitchen to use this stuff? How do I cook this meal? Like thinking through those things and learning how to do that stuff at that time before she moved in. And I'm like, for me, it really hit for me because I love to cook and do stuff. So I'm like, I bought this food processor and I have this, Instapot and all this stuff that I love. And then now, I'm putting it all together, and now I'm cooking this stuff now. Now we're in the house.
Not cooking just for you. You're cooking for your husband and maybe your children,
Yeah.
maybe the entire family. Right. And that's a real specialty you're bringing to really honor this new family you're a part of. Right.
Yeah.
And this is stuff these gifts are meant to bless. Right. And people.
So then flip it to us waiting, right? This stuff that we're doing now, we're going to be able to use our gifts. We're just test running it.
Yeah.
We're learning how to use them now, and it's going to be something that just
And there's blessing. It's stewarding and pursuing these things now. There is a promised blessing that you're going to continue operating in that forever. Yeah. And but it's going to be a joyful thing. And so,
It's cool.
Yeah, it is. For me, it's very exciting because it's not like, okay, now I have a salvation and I'm saved from my sins, which is huge. But that's just the beginning of the process. It's not just about like white knuckling your way through life trying to avoid sinning. It's so much bigger than that. Like, okay, I'm going to have to force myself to like Timon. Oh, dang it. No, I love Timon.
It's tough.
Oh,
To be honest.
but from my care of Timon, I'm going to do things for him just because I care about him and I think he's a good guy and I'm so thankful for his friendship and his help and so many things in my life. So I want to do things for you. I want to do things that connect us and we can spend time over dinner with the family and watch the little one running around crazy, right? So when you love someone, you want to pursue getting to know them.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing that we need to be doing is to get to know your groom. You're going to spend eternity with him. Do you really want to start there getting to know him, or you'd like to have a little bit of a clue on the front side? And his love letter to you is available for you to read.
Right.
If you want to know what his character is like, read how he interacts with people.
Right.
How did he treat the marginalized?
Mm-hmm. You have his words.
You have his actions, too.
Yeah.
Right. And so, get to know your skills, but also get to know your groom. Yeah, and I'm like you. I love to cook, and so I like all the doodads and the.
Yeah, it gets exciting.
It's fun. It's fun to play.
Tell us a little bit about the last phase.
The last phase is the big happy moment. That's the wedding, right? Okay, so the time of got to check my notes. They're all kind of all over the place. Okay, so you remember how I said the groom doesn't get to say when the house is done and he can go get her?
Right.
Okay, well, when Dad says, "Okay, son, you're good," and it's 2 a.m., he puts that hammer down. Do you think he's going to wait till the next morning?
He's
no.
gone. Yeah.
Because his best man's probably with him, like they go. And the best man gets a bunch of rowdies, trumpets, pots and pans, and they go through town making a big noise, waking everybody up, and getting the bride, and it's time.
Mm-hmm. Now,
don't think that was unfair for the girl's family because they would have been getting reports like, "Oh, he's putting the paint on the trim. I saw him sweeping out the garage yesterday." They'll be getting reports of having a rough idea of when it's getting close.
Yeah.
So they would know it's getting close. But she wouldn't know the exact moment. And in fact, when she knows the time is getting close, she would often take to sleeping in her wedding dress. Which aren't the big froofy, frilly, lacy doodads that we have now. I mean, it would have been a simpler thing, but she wanted to be prepared and ready at a moment's notice.
She was ready to rock and roll.
She was ready to start her new life. And I think that's an indicator for us, too, that we should have a sense of anticipation of being with Jesus. For me, that's the thing that's constantly in the back of my mind. Yeah, okay, I'm going about my day with my job and teaching kids at school and having dinner with friends, but also there is this constant running in my back of my mind, like, I see things that are happening in the world and going, it's possible that the time is close. It is possible. And I don't say that to freak people out, but, okay, so am I ready? Yeah.
I'm ready to party.
Am I ready to party? Right. This is not like a funeral dirge, like, oh.
Right.
Right. It's meant to be a celebration. Right. So then the marriage ceremony happens with the chuppah canopy thing again and another glass of wine celebrated between them with their vows. And this is where you may have seen this in TV shows or in real life, I don't know, where they take that wine glass, the final wine glass, the cup of praise between the bride and groom. They both drink from it only. They wrap it in a cloth. He puts it on the floor and he smashes that sucker. Why?
Because the deed is done.
The deed is done, and no one else gets to drink from this cup but us. It's a final, like, you and me, babe, forever. And that's it.
That's sweet.
Isn't that sweet? And then they're put on chairs, and they're, paraded around the room, and then they get whisked off to a private place between the two of them, and the marriage is consummated. They finally get to be together. Yeah. Like, no more waiting. Although some of us might feel that's awkward knowing there's an entire village of people out there going,
are they doing it?
Yeah. Right. Like, oh, no pressure. Yeah.
That would be a very awkward, it makes me kind of cringe a little bit.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of people cringe. Like, oh no,
Yeah.
right.
That's funny.
Yeah, and there's other details with that, but just suffice it to say that when Jesus comes back for us, the cup of praise, the final consummation of that marriage, and then it's forever. You know, it's pretty cool. And then they get to. There's a 7-day party. The whole week, the whole village parties it up, and it's pretty wild all week. And then he physically carries her to her new home, and then they get to spend a full year honeymoon. And it's the groom's family's job to care for them while they get to just be. All that hard work for both of them, they get a chance to just rest and start a family.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully at least one bun in the oven, if not a second one on the way. So, right. So they get carried. She gets carried off to her new home. So the cup of praise is the cup that Jesus hasn't had yet. He's waiting. Long distance relationships, man, they aren't any fun. From what I've been told. Yeah. Cool.
It's cool to see that even like the Last Supper is a mirror of this wedding feast, this whole wedding ceremony.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it just you're laying in, like I said, the framework of understanding the Bible a little bit better.
Yeah.
It's
and
exciting.
It's just so cool.
Yeah.
So I wanted to end with where do we get this idea of, the cup of praise is part of the marriage ceremony? We get that out of Revelation chapter 19. Verses 6 through 19 actually give us information about the marriage supper. So this is the final deal. So I'd be curious for those of you who are listening, if you go back and you're reading through the Gospels and you see Jesus referencing marriages or weddings, or there's there's a couple of parables about weddings that are really curious, like the 10 virgins. There's another one about sending invitations to people and nobody shows up, and so he just invites anybody on the street kind of thing. So I'd be curious to just, with this information in mind and reframing, going back to the scriptures and reading with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll say after your teaching on Sunday, I was reading in Isaiah, and God's talking about how he ransomed his people out of Egypt. Like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
There's that dowry again.
There it is again.
Yeah. Exactly. So
Jesus paying bank, man.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that Jesus paid the dowry twice. He paid the dowry for the Jewish people, right, to rescue them out of slavery. And that's the people that God chose to work through to establish all the books of the Bible being written down. And that's the genetic family line that Jesus comes from.
Right.
Okay. And so, the Hebrew word dayenu, had he done just that, it would have been enough. But Jesus didn't want only some. He wanted all of us.
Right.
And so he paid it a second time.
So cool.
Yeah.
And we get to take part of that.
Yeah.
That's a really cool thing.
So I would encourage you, if you're a person who follows Christ, the next time you take communion, remember that is remembering that you're betrothed. And it's remembering he's promising to come back for you. That as bad as it gets here.
Yeah. And stay loyal.
Yeah. Stay loyal and encourage you. Pursue purity and righteousness to the best of your ability, because that's how you honor him.
Yeah.
It's not because, out of compulsion or
rules or
no,
it's
out of thankfulness, like how much you've done for me and what I know you're promising to continue to do for me. And yeah. Be driven. Love wins when you're driven by it.
It's so good. Hope, thank you so much for coming through and
anytime.
Yeah. I would send people to your website, but we just disabled it.
Yeah. Well, be looking for it in future soon. TamariskTreeMin.com.
I'll still put links.
Yeah, we'll put a link to it.
You're going to have curriculum up of layers of information for people to ever go in and kind of get access to.
Yeah.
and also Israel tours in the future too. Maybe not anytime soon, but
Well, yeah, we got to let things calm
just
down
got one
there.
done.
Yeah, I just did one.
Let's not think
So-
about another one.
Woo.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in the process. Well, I'm in the process right now of getting Tamarisk Tree Ministries off the ground, which is it'll be an online Bible teaching forum where there'll be online courses for people to take. So if you enjoy this podcast, this is the kind of thing that we'll be teaching about.
Yeah.
The betrothal will be one of the lessons that people can check out. I have a lesson that's going to be all about Old Testament, like explaining the major events of the Old Testament, so you have kind of a context for things, and then also the New Testament. So I have, one of my major hearts is to explain culture to people so that when they're reading, they go, oh, it just makes reading the Bible accessible, and it really helps. I think just makes it exciting and not like a drag or something I think I have to force myself to do. And I've seen so much fruit in people's lives over the years from being able to share with them what I know, and I'm excited to make that as a bigger audience. So, it's cool.
Cool. I hope. Thank you so much. This has been great.
Yeah, it's been good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Any last words, Allison?
Peace.
Peace.
Deuces.
Catch you on the next Timonspodcast. Bye.
Bye.